idea is the format is 45 minutes for...
Yeah, probably even less, 30,
okay.
35.
Okay, that's fine. And then 15 minutes questions. What we can... Dobro. Okay.
Thank you.
1, 2, 3. Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I can take it.
Mogle bi... Okay, can we start? Can we continue? Uh, our next speaker is very dear to me personally because I spent many of the formative years before I became a professor at University of Zagreb in the group of Professor Maria Graça Carvalho at Instituto Superior Técnico, and I learned many things there. Among other things is how to organize conferences. Maria Graça Carvalho is currently member of European Parliament in this 2019-24 mandate. In the European Parliament, she is a full member of Committee on Industry, Research and Energy, ITRE, which is a very important committee for our activities. She is a deputy coordinator of EPP, which is the largest political group. In the past, Maria de Graça Carvalho has also served as member of Parliament from 2009 to 2014. As MEP, she was appointed rapporteur of the specific program implementing Horizon 2020 and on the report of simplification of the rules. In 2011, she was awarded the prize for the best MEP in the area of research and innovation, and in this year for innovation. She was principal advisor of President of the European Commission in the areas of science, innovation, energy, environment, and climate change from 2006 to 2009. That's we got the climate energy package, a very important one. And Professor Maria Graça Carvalho took a very important role in that policy. She was a Minister of Science and Higher Education in 2 Portuguese governments. She is a full professor in Instituto Superior Técnico, University of Lisbon. She is member of 22 scientific associations and fellow of many academies like American Association of the Advancement of Science, World Academy of Art and Science, European Academy Science Advisory Council, etc., etc. In the European Parliament, okay, I think I have, that's it, okay. It's a very long career, so there are many positions that Professor has. So I would like to invite you now to the floor. And the floor is yours.
So good morning again, and thank you very much for the committee of SDEWES and Professor Nevandwich to have chosen me for this invited lecture. When thinking about the topic that I should speak, I decided that probably would be useful for you that are working on energy, that I tell you about the most recent developments on the European energy policy that is undergoing a lot of changes, and I'm deeply working 200% on these important files that we are speeding up because of the recent developments. So at the same time that I will describe you the change that we are doing at the European energy policy, I will point it out the need for more research, pilot scale and full scale demonstration, and the importance of research and innovation to achieve our goals. I know that there are several participants that are not from Europe, but I think that is also interest for them because this is a trend that it will be followed, I'm sure, all over the world, the same kind of policies that we are putting together in Europe. I would like to start with a very short historic perspective on energy, mainly for the non-Europeans. I suppose most of the Europeans know this, but in any way is a very short introduction, and to tell you that, as most of you already know, energy was the start point of the European construction. It was on 9th of May of 1950 that the French Foreign Minister Robert Schuman proposed the creation of the European Coal and Steel Community that after was established 2 years later in 1952. So the idea to rebuild Europe after the Second World War was mainly based on coal community and on the steel industry. And the second important development was some years later in Rome, in 1957, where the original 6 countries that were in the coal and steel community, they signed 2 treaties, treaties of Rome, and where in one of them the European Economic Community was established, and the second one was again energy, was the European Atomic Energy Community, the Euratom. It's a very important treaty related with nuclear energy that gives competence to the Europe in terms of research and safety and the precautionary principle, keeping the decision of nuclear to each of member states. The next development was done by Jacques Delors in 1987, where the European single market was created, and their energy was also very important. So was all the principles of liberalization of the market. But in all these steps, energy remain in essential terms a responsibility of the member states. And the word energy, apart from the Euratom and in the liberalization of the market, the word energy was not in the treaties. So in certain way, any time that we need to have some action on energy was very difficult because the responsibility of energy is mainly on the member states. And I start working with President of the European Commission, President Barroso, in 2005, and later on, 2006, 2007, we had a quite important energy crisis. Some of you do not remember or were too young, but was already originated with the conflict in Ukraine and Russia of the passage of the gas through Ukraine, Russian gas that was passing through Ukraine, and we had the need to push for some common action on energy, but we didn't have legal basis. So the idea was to put energy together with climate change, because on climate change we have shared responsibility. So like this, in 2008, we have a first European strategy for energy and climate change that was called at the time the 320s. So we had as objective to reduce the green gas emissions by 20% in 2020, so we were in 2008, to increase 20% the share of renewables, and the energy in the final energy consumption also to achieve 20% until 2020. We realized some years later, when we did a revision of this strategy in 2014, that the progress was not very big. So the European Commission decided to keep the same objectives until 2030. So from 2008 to 2014, not a lot of advancements were done. We had some in renewables, but very few in terms of mainly on energy efficiency, very few. Meanwhile, there was an important achievement that the word energy was included in the revision of the treaties in the Treaty of Lisbon. So it gave us a little bit more power on energy, but still most of the responsibilities still relies with the member state. Until 2018, in 2018, there was the realization that we need to do something, and there was an important revision of the directives, both the Renewable Energy Directive and the Energy Efficiency Directive, and we went to more ambitious targets. So we set a binding target, and it's called the RED II, is a second revision of Renewable Energy Directive, and we went to a binding target of 32% for the renewable sources in the EU gross final consumption. And then the energy efficiency, we set also a more ambitious goal of improving energy efficiency at least 32.5% by 2030, but was not a binding target. The renewables was a binding target, but not the energy efficiency. But the progress, as I told you, continued to be a bit on the renewables, but not much in the rest. So when this college started and the new parliament started in 2019, the new president, Mrs. van der Leyen, has chosen energy and climate change as her main agenda, what she called the growth agenda, and she called it the Green Deal. And she put a very ambitious, and this was before the war and before the pandemic, so 2019, she has chosen together or assisted by a digital transformation, this green transformation as her main agenda, and she called it the Green Deal. So according to the Green Deal, Europe must become climate neutral by 2050. And this strategy was important, but the most important is what came afterward. 1 year after, still before the pandemic and the war, a very important step happened, and I consider that the most important one so far in the energy policy. That is the climate law, because for the first time we didn't have only objectives, only targets, only strategies. We have a law, and the law is to to be, everyone has to obey the law, we hope. And in this climate law sets a legal binding target of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 for Europe, and incorporates a EU target for 2030, that for me is the most difficult one, more difficult than the 2050, of 55% as also a legal binding target. So in few years, because there is few years until 2030, we need to achieve 55% reduction, and this is legally binding. There is also a commitment that Europe will become negative emission after 2050. And the progress didn't stop here. After that, the Commission worked very hard to make sure that in all the sectors there would be revision of the existing directives or new directives that will fulfill these binding targets. So, again 1 year later, in 2021, already during the pandemic but before the war, the European Commission proposed a package that is called the Fit for 55, that consists on an umbrella communication and 17 regulations, so directives, regulations, that covers most of the economic sectors. And one important also, compared with previous strategies that we had in Europe, is that before we were concentrate our reductions mostly in electricity production and large industry with large combustion chambers. Now, this package is much broader. It covers buildings, it covers transport, it covers also at certain degree agriculture, forest. So in all the means of transport, from aviation to maritime transport, is a very comprehensive, and these dossiers were the procedure always in Europe is that there is the initiative belongs to the European Commission, the dossiers go to Parliament and Council, we prepare our position, we approve our position, each Parliament and Council, and after that negotiation. And what the situation now is that we have finalized our position in most of them, and we are in final negotiations with the Council. So in the beginning of next year, the files will be approved. So I will go quickly through the most important ones, and I will start with what I consider the most important one, is the third revision of the Renewable Energy Directive. And so the European Commission, and this was proposed before the war, as I've told you, had set a target for 2030 to 40%, from the 32% that was to 40%. As the war has started, and when we did our report in the European Parliament, the war was already in place. We have proposed and we have voted. We have is a rapporteur from our political group, Markus Pieper from EPP. He proposed to increase to 45%, and this was agreed in the European Parliament and is agreed by the Council already and Commission. So in the negotiations we are working around this objective of the 45%. I'm very proud of an amendment of mine, also co-signed by other colleagues, where we have included, and the amendment has also passed, that I have included a sub-target for innovative renewable technologies of 5%. So out of these 45%, we need to include 5% needs to be from new technologies, wave, tidal, so innovative technologies, and for that here there is a large scope of research, because this target of the 5% is for 2030. So in order that they are working and producing renewable electricity in 2030, we really need to accelerate the research and the demonstration in these innovative renewable technologies. It also sets a comprehensive framework for the deployment of renewable energy technologies, in particular on sectors where the progress has been slower, that are mainly the transport and the buildings. And another important topic is that we have amended the biofuel that was already mentioned this morning, the biofuel sustainability criteria. We have a more narrow sustainability criteria, and we have extended the sustainability criteria to biomass that didn't have a sustainability criteria so far. There was a lot of discussions on hydropower. Some wanted to have sustainability criteria for hydropower, but due to the fact that many countries, like my own, rely a lot on the hydropower, and especially when they have scarce of gas for the base on the electricity production, the hydropower was safeguarded and no sustainable criteria will be applied to the hydropower. So these are the main topics of the renewable energy directive. As you will see later on, now we are starting already. This is the RED 3. Now we are starting the RED 4 because of the permitting. The REPowerEU has asked us to act on the fast-tracking procedure on the permitting, and that we are working there. As we had already finished this work, we have opened a new amendment, and we are doing for projects that already exist, and there is an extension of existing projects. Very light permits are necessary, and for completely new projects, we set a maximum of 2 years for all the permits that are necessary. So the energy efficiency. On the energy efficiency, there is also a lot of changes. We didn't have binding targets. Now we have binding targets. We have the energy efficiency first principle, so we should not do complex projects on electricity production if you do not have optimized your energy efficiency in your system. It sets an overall target of at least 40% in final energy consumption and 42.5% in primary energy consumption, compared with 2007, and all this to 2030. These are national binding targets, and that is very demanding. It's not a European average. So it means that every country, from Poland to Denmark is easy, but some others are not so easy, so they all have to fill these binding targets. This was a big discussion, because to have an average would be easier for some countries. We kept the near zero emissions building principle for new constructions, and something that has been a lot of discussion that will be, it looks a small number, but it means a lot of investments, a target of 3% of renovation of public buildings every year. So it means investment from public authorities. On the emissions trading scheme, The main novelty is that we have a new emissions trade scheme for transport and for buildings. Before it was only for large combustion chambers and electricity production. This emissions trade scheme feeds into two funds, the modernization fund, that is a fund for the coal transition, the regions that still have coal and need to do the transition, and the innovation fund that is to support innovative technologies that need to have demonstrations like CCU and other innovative technologies. Also, it includes measures for energy-intensive industry to deploy innovative clean technologies on these energy-intensive, and they are given free allowances. These sectors like the cement, glass, they are given some free allowance in the ETS, in the emissions trade scheme, but now these free allowances are only given if they show that they are doing efforts to decarbonize. Anyway, this free allowance will phase out as the carbon border adjustment mechanism, that is a new mechanism, is going to be entered in place. In this mechanism, we have for the first time a regulation that applies the taxes to products that are imported from countries that outside the EU that do not follow the same kind of standards in terms of climate change as we do. And this regulation was designed to be WTO compatible. There was a lot of discussion on this carbon border adjustment mechanism, as Europe is the largest exporter in the world, and there was a lot of questions if WTO will not accept it well and could have some negative repercussion in our exportations. Again, we have a very important regulation for light vehicles and vans. So this was also a big discussion, and as a conclusion, I don't know if you have been aware, but it's going to change the life of a lot of Europeans. A zero-emission EU fleet by 2050, and this means that from 2035, any new vehicles cannot have internal combustion engines. So internal combustion engines will finish in 2035, so it is expected that the existing ones that still can continue to be in the roads, they will have a end of life, so by 2050 it will be no internal combustion engines. That is a big transformation, is one of the most that will have as consequence a lot of transformation in infrastructure, in the automotive industry. So it was also a difficult regulation to negotiate. On the Energy Taxation Directive, we have also a lot of changes. I would only point out the most important one, that the member states are able to support vulnerable households to protect against energy poverty, but not to give subsidies to fossil fuels. So that was also a very important decision. Also, member states can help the industries that are in need. Here there has been a lot of discussions because we want to keep the competition laws and we want to keep our internal market, and one of the bases of the internal market is that we have a fair competition and we have countries that can help their industry much more than others. So they can create here an unfair competition. So we have asked the European Commission, Vice President Vestager, that she should have look at the rules, how the member states are helping the industry. They should help, because some industries cannot survive, but that keeps some fair competition among the member states. This has created a lot of problems between north of Italy and Germany, and in terms of Poland and Germany, about the different subsidies that member states are giving to some sectors. So we have to keep some common rules to keeping the competition. On the land use change and forestry, probably the most important is that from 2031 onwards, the regulation will expand it also to agricultural sector. That is going to be a very difficult implementation, but to include non-CO2 emissions from agriculture sector. Now, on the infrastructure, a lot of change needs to be done in infrastructures. We set mandatory targets for deployment of alternative fuels infrastructures in road vehicles, ships, and aircraft. So this directive set targets for electric, H2, hydrogen, and LNG recharging points for light and heavy vehicles along the trans-European networks and for ports and airports. The recharging for cars and vans every 60 kilometers in 2035, hydrogen every 150 kilometers, and the recharging points in any nodes in the urban environment. So, as you can see here, a lot of investment is required for infrastructure. The full maritime regulation, the limits on greenhouse gas intensity of the energy used in ships compared with 2020, it starts quite modest because there is not yet technology available, so there is here a field for research. In 2030, only -6, but after it accelerates to arrive to 2050 with -75%. For the refuel in aviation, sets targets also start quite modest and accelerating. For sustainable aviation fuels as a percentage of the fuel mix, but encourage the most innovative and sustainable fuels like advanced biofuels and synthetic fuels derived mainly from hydrogen. So these are the summary of all the legislation of the 54-55, but as I told you during the preparation of our reports in the European Parliament, we had the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and at that time, I think Nevenwich has presented these numbers, it was so obvious that we had neglected the security of supply. The EU import 90% of the gas from outside Europe, and 45% were coming from Russia, 25% of oil from Russia, and 45% coal. The coal as imports has stopped. The oil will stop first, is decreased a lot, and it will stop in the beginning of the year. And the gas, it has decreased about 10%. For example, the pipeline gas from Russia, that was 40%, is now 9%. So we are importing gas from non-Russian, we are importing a lot from Norway and other suppliers and LNG from Nigeria, and now we have problems in Nigeria with the floods, also the US and many other countries. So the first measure, the urgent measure that the European Commission took was to ensure that we have gas storage fill up to at least 80% of the capacity by 1st of November, this 1st of November, and we have accomplished that value. So we have gas, enough gas, if we don't have a very severe winter, for this winter. After we will see, but for this winter we will have enough gas. But this was not enough. The war has continued and the prices were going up at the time. So the Commission came out with a package of REPowerEU, and the REPowerEU is mainly a package that has objective to diversify the gas supply using LNG, pipeline imports from non-Russian suppliers, using more biomethane, renewable hydrogen production, and also boosting even more than what is in Fit for 55, the energy efficiency, speeding up the electrification and the renewables. And for that we are doing RED 4 with the fast track of the permitting, and addressing the infrastructure's bottlenecks. So with REPowerEU, hydrogen gained a lot of importance, a reinforced role, and mainly for decarbonize the heavy industry and some of the transport sectors, like the long the transport in big in ships and long distance transport. So the REPowerEU introduced some targets in the other directives that we were working. For example, on the hydrogen, it sets a target of the production of 10 million tons of renewable hydrogen inside the EU by 2030, and to import the same amount from outside the EU. So there is a lot of questions. I question myself how this hydrogen is going to be transported to the EU. A lot of research that is required there. How we, from where and how we transport this hydrogen, and what will be the use of the hydrogen. Also, it set an increased hydrogen sub-target in industry. So by 2030, 50% of the hydrogen used in the industry, there is many process industries using hydrogen, 50% needs to be renewable, and in 35, 70% needs to be renewable. So there is also, again, a lot of more upscale pilot scale that is required for the renewable production of hydrogen. Additional funds were also added to the public-private partnership Clean Hydrogen to double the number of hydrogen valleys. The additional fund was 200 million euros. I was rapporteur of this partnership, so I was happy that they have reinforced this, the funds for this partnership. So with the continuation after the REPowerEU, they have realized that these measures are still not enough. So both Parliament and the Council have put another package of measures on the table that are still under discussion. Some have been agreed. That is very recently, end of October. They were discussing in the European Council on the 21st of October. Some have agreed and are quite consensual, like mobilizing national and EU tools to protect the households and the industry that are more vulnerable. That is a consensus. Increase efforts to save energy is a consensus. Probably is not put in practice as much as we would like, but there are consensus. The fast tracking of simplification of permit procedures for renewables is a consensus, but again, let's see in practical terms if it works, if member states will put it in place. Voluntary joint purchasing of gas, making full use of a EU platform. The Commission has designed a EU platform that is also open to Western Balkans and associated Eastern countries. But this is consensus, but member states are not yet using this possibility of joint purchasing of the gas. And the one that they have agreed, but is also probably not happening, is the full integrated single energy market with reinforced construction of the interconnections that are still missing. And there are, from this part of the world, Southeast Europe, interconnections that are still missing. Iberian Peninsula has very weak connections with France, and we see immediately France reacting against this. So it's very important, they agree in principle, but in practical terms there are some resistance. I left the end the two measures that still that we don't have an agreement between the member states is the temporary cap the price of gas in the electricity generation. Is still not a consensual decision because some member states are afraid that the cap of the gas price will make difficult to get the gas when is necessary because they will have competition from other parts that pay higher price for the gas. And the last one that it will lead to a lot of discussions and is a good subject for researchers and the researchers that is present. The Commission is announcing that is proposing in the beginning of the year an improved design of the electricity market. So I have to say that I'm a bit worried about this improved design of the electricity market. Neven has already mentioned this. The design that we have now has reacted as it should. And I don't know how, it's very difficult and very dangerous to change the market in times of crisis. So we still do not have information in which direction the Commission is going to improve this electricity market design, but I suspect it's going to be a subject of a lot of discussion, a lot of work, a lot of research in the next few months. So all this, you can see that Europe is facing a huge challenge, at the same time that we are very dependent on energy, we are very dependent on critical raw materials that allow us to do the transition. And in order to overcome this challenge, in parallel with the policy development that we are doing, and there we are advanced a lot, we need to have a strong research and innovation program. We have Horizon Europe with about 100 million euros for until 27, but it's not enough. So we really need, for all this challenge, is not enough. We need to make use of other programs like the Innovation Fund that I have mentioned here, but the Recovery and Resilience Plan that is managed, is EU, but is managed in each member state, the regional funds. So we have to press the member states to use some of these funds to energy. And inside the Horizon 2020, I want to draw your attention because sometimes you do not apply so much to this part, to the public-private partnerships. I was rapporteur all of them, and you have many in this area, from clean hydrogen, as I mentioned, the clean aviation, the circular bio-based Europe, clean steel, process industry, zero-emission road transport, a partnership on batteries, and the zero-emission waterborne transport. So in certain way covering the areas that we need to deliver to fulfill the objectives of this legislation. So in conclusion, we are in a point where we need the right policies. We have to have a strategy for investment and money to invest, and a strong research and innovation capacity. These three elements are crucial to overcome our fragility in terms of energy dependence and critical materials dependence, and only like that we can overpass all these difficulties that we are in at the moment. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professora Carvalho. Before opening floor for questions, I would like to say why this is so important for us researchers. I was a combustion engineer, and I really liked my internal combustion engine models. But then it's ended. I mean, I had to switch. Now I'm working in energy system analysis. So don't stick to your research area forever. You have to follow where there is need for research. And now you heard inside view of what will be financed in the next decade, which is crucial for your career. Don't try to continue research in areas which will not be financed, because then you will have no money for research, and we need research funding. I'm opening now floor for discussion. Questions? Yes. Do we have microphone? Domenico Borello. Can you also say the
Yes.
university?
Okay, thank you. My name is Domenico Borello. I'm professor at Sapienza University of Rome. Thank you very much for your presentation, your speech. It is quite interesting. I just would like to have, if you have, some more information about this hydrogen bank of investment that was proposed recently. They say that they have 3 billion euro for I don't understand if they are 3 billions per year or 3 billions in total, and if there will be some specific program for research, or it is just something for the companies. Thank you.
If maybe more questions, and then we will have answers. Goran Krajic, University of Zagreb. For now, I know all questionnaires.
Yes, I would like just to know what happened to Energy Union. It was a quite good initiative before in form of clean energy for Europe, and then clean energy for all Europeans. But now I think it was not pushed so much, because this is something that we need maybe the most now.
One more question? Please, your name
I
and...
guess you don't know me.
No.
So I'm Raphaël Amouet from École Polytechnique Fédérale Lausanne. I'm wondering about the emission trading system 2 that is coming out for buildings on terms of commercial and non-commercial buildings. So how is it being effectively implemented? So how is the European Union approaching it?
Maybe 3 questions. Maybe one more? Okay, we have a question there.
Yeah, hello, Timo Guerres, Universidad Pontificia Comillas, Madrid, Spain. I'm actually wondering if we look in the European context, we have massive challenges of integrating our energy markets. And when we look at the Iberian context, we see that, for example, France is kind of not cooperating with integrating the Iberian Peninsula into basically the European energy market. When we look at hydrogen pipelines, hydrogen pipelines, electricity connection. And I was wondering, what is your opinion about that, and whether you think that the European Union can help in basically moving these topics forward in the next and upcoming years?
So, the hydrogen bank, I think that the value is total and is mainly for scaling up, but we are pushing that also research is involved together with the companies in the proposals, and I hope that they have open system of proposals and that they involve university research, but is mainly focused on companies to have the full scale of the hydrogen. Goran Energy Union. This was a very interesting idea, mainly pushed by Professor Buzek, from an MEP, Professor of Energy from Poland, and was President of the European Parliament. In the previous period. So it happens a bit always is like in governments when there is a new period with new parliament, a new college, they give new names, but most of the principles of the energy union are there. So it's just a question of a different name. On the emissions trade for buildings, is considered on the fuel itself, not in the building, but in the original source of energy, and for the time being is only for the commercial buildings. But this is one of the topics that we are still in negotiations. It's a very difficult topic. And there is another directive that belongs to the 17 that I didn't talk because it's so complex that we would need to be there talking during 2 hours. That is the revision of energy efficient directive in buildings, where what is required to do in buildings needs such an investment, and there are so many problems, social housing, reconversion of existing buildings, and the lack of funding for that is becoming a very difficult file to find an agreement. So for the time being, they are looking at commercial buildings also. There are exceptions for historic buildings, but buildings is a very difficult in terms of investments, because we have in most of member states a population that are getting old, that do not have a lot of possibilities of investments, and the investments that is required to do the reconversion and the energy efficiency in buildings is high. So we need at the same time to have support schemes to help them to do that. On the interconnections, there's been a very, very lively discussion, especially in Portugal, Spain. We had at the last council a meeting between the 3 countries, France, Portugal, and Spain, that it seems that they have not given a lot of priority to the electricity connections, and instead they give full priority to a gas pipeline from Marseille to Barcelona, and they call it green channel, a green saying that it's preparing for hydrogen when all the rest of the pipeline is not prepared for hydrogen. So it's just a way to call green to a gas pipeline. We have the feeling that France is not willing to build electricity connections through connecting to the Iberian Peninsula in order to protect their electricity from nuclear, and they have proposed this instead, but is not as good solution as we would like, because it's not a really hydrogen pipeline. It will take a lot of investment before it's a green pipeline. So we are looking at possibilities, and it's something that, but it takes time, it's something that we would like to see in the future, if there is amendments to the treaties, that there are more responsibility at European level for energy, at least as far as internal market, because we have a lot of, the internal market is responsibility of the Union. So interconnections and cross-borders should be responsibility of the Union, and the member states could not oppose. So it's not like that at the moment, but it's something that most of the MEPs are trying to push, that in the future we have more power in the energy internal market.
Thank you. I think our time is up for questions, and I would like to thank you very much again for this excellent insight into new policies and how these policies will turn into our research funding. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I would like to close this session now and invite you for the next session, which is the lunch. Lunch is served downstairs. You will be directed by local organizing committee, and you need this pale blue piece of paper in order to